Welcome. Today on Catholic Messenger Conversations, Bishop Thomas Zinkula shares his thoughts on the life of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, who died December 31st, 2022, nearly a decade after his historic resignation as Pope. Bishop Zinkula presided at a diocesan mass for the late Pontiff Emeritus on January 4th at Sacred Heart Cathedral. So just wanted to give a little bit of that background as we get into this conversation. So I'm just wondering, how do you think the background, the formative years, and the time and the place in which Pope Emeritus Benedict grew up, how did that shape his theology and papacy?
Okay, so, what was his background? What happened during his formative years? And he grew up in a small Bavarian town in Germany, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just across the border from Austria, and particularly Salzburg was right there. He was a huge fan of Salzburg's native son Mozart. As you recall, he liked to play the piano for
that's right.
Benedict, remember? That was kind of for
forgot about that.
Relaxation and whatever. He was the youngest of three children in a lower middle class household. I thought it's interesting that I don't know if I knew this or I'd forgotten it, but after he died, there's all this stuff about him. His parents' names were Joseph and Mary.
Oh, wow.
Joseph was a policeman, and Mary was a homemaker, and she also sometimes would cook different places. So he was really shaped by the Nazism, right? He was 6 years old when Hitler came to power. He's 18 years old when World War II ended in 1945. So that definitely shaped his youth.
Yeah.
His family did not embrace Nazism. I mean, he had to be part of the youth deal, but just because he had to. So having said all that, I have no idea how all of that shaped, his theology and papacy. I mean, I suppose it did, but I don't know. It comes to reflecting on it. All I know is that he was one of the most talented Catholic minds of his generation, and so all that stuff flowed into that. And as you know, he served as a theological expert during the Second Vatican Council. It's like 35 or 36. I mean,
that's just amazing.
So I don't know. All of that somehow kind of sorted itself out in that manner that he was.
Well, I wonder because I read something about how fond he was of his family, his parents and his siblings, and it sounds like the family was pretty religious. So
yeah, definitely they were, and he was. His brother was a priest as well.
Oh, that's right.
He was very close to him. I hear a lot about his sister, but I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. So that just fascinated me because I just wonder all of that heavy stuff.
I mean, a lot of times people when they, the seminaries and monasteries and everything filled up after the Second World War.
Oh,
so that helped people to recognize the importance of faith in their, just going through that whole hell.
Yes.
And so maybe with him, he wasn't in combat or anything, but that could have, and coming from a very observant family, and then this whole thing with just that what he experienced in Nazi Germany, that drew him deeper into the faith.
Well, I wondered because I thought about Pope John Paul II. It came from a sort of similar. I mean, at least he was in that era. Yeah. And I just wondered how that shaped them, and they had a very close relationship too. And I wondered if it was all that kind of background that really shaped who they.
It's got to make a difference. I mean, why did seminaries fill up? Why did monasteries fill up? Why did there's there aren't any. What is it about?
Faith was this thing you had to lean onto.
Yeah, right? There's like in foxholes. What's that saying? There's.
Oh yeah, there are no atheists in foxholes.
Right there.
Something
somehow
like
it can when things are falling apart, then you kind of grab onto something that's more solid. That probably, maybe magnified his faith for him.
I was just curious about that. What your thoughts were. So in your homily for the Mass, which I thought was really, really, really great. You said that Pope Emeritus Benedict gave himself to the Church pastorally, intellectually, and spiritually. What are some examples of his self-gift to the Church?
Right. So since it was Christmas, I was tying that to the Christmas
Yes.
characters, right? So for pastorally, the shepherds, pastoring the sheep and all that, he was shy and soft-spoken. Everybody says that about him. He was kind. He was gentle. He was compassionate and hospitable. People talk about him being a model of grace and humility. When he was elected pope, he described himself as a simple, humble laborer in the vineyard of the Lord. That's like when I talk about myself. I'm just this farm kid, right? This Catholic farm kid from Iowa, And so, as a pope, he demonstrated that he had a pastor's heart and a grandfatherly gentleness. That was kind of his persona. And I used to hear about God's Rottweiler, and he was in the CDF, the Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith, and because he had to crack down on things. And so I like probably most people, had a sense of him as being this hard-nosed guy. Well, I've talked to priests and bishops who knew him, worked with him in Rome, and during that time, they would say, he's not like that at all. He's this, these other kinds of things, adjectives I used. So that's kind of like, that was just something that was a role he had to play, at that time, and he thought he did anyway. And so there's a pastoral thing in terms of intellectually. Everybody talks about his astute intelligence. He was a superb, brilliant theologian. But there's that pastoral piece too. He always, as a teacher, he always sought to speak the truth with love. Love, he wrote and talked about love a lot. That in terms of his relationship with God, and God's a God of love, and that was very sincere and authentic. That was kind of the heart of kind of who he was and his faith. And he talks about love seeking understanding. So that's sort of theology sometimes described as faith seeking understanding.
Yeah.
In terms of the intellectual thing, faith. But he talked about love seeking understanding. So as a theologian, he's trying to kind of explain the faith, and from that perspective, and he says, so love seeks understanding. It wishes to know even better the one whom it loves. It seeks his face. So, with regard to that side of him, in terms of...
And love being Christ.
Love being God, Christ, yeah right, exactly. In terms of that, what he gave to the church, his self-gift to the church, his kind of classical book early on was Introduction to Christianity, published in 1968. It was one of the...
Oh.
Yeah, no, that was one of the best... People, it's one of the best single-volume accounts of our faith. It's kind of a meditation on faith.
Yeah, write that down. Tell me what was that?
Introduction to Christianity. It's a meditation on faith that reaches into the depths of the human experience. Wow. So that's a significant book for him. Then there are 3 encyclicals, and then the 3 books on the life of Jesus of Nazareth. That towards the end, that was a big thing for him to kind of pull his thinking together in those books.
I forgot. Did he write those as Pope, or did he write those?
I think he was Pope. Yeah, I think so.
And I'm wondering, did they work into his encyclicals then?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for spiritually, giving himself to the church spiritually, he always had deep love for sacred liturgy. It was his source and summit. It was the beginning and the end of everything that he did. He sought through his teaching and his scholarship, his writing, to educate people how to read and understand the Scripture, and he continuously announced the enduring presence of Christ's love in the Eucharistic mystery.
Wow.
So that says a lot about him, the man, and the scholar, and and priest, pastor.
That makes me interested in going back and reading some more of his books, and some of his rereading some of the encyclicals and letters The
Right.
one on charity is really good. I know
I think
that.
people would say, if you had to, all these gifts, that was his best gift. I think was his scholarship, his Catholic mind and his intellect and his writing. He could express that so beautifully.
Wow, that's very, very good. So you also said that we witness his humility in a striking way when he resigned as Pope. How so? Why? What do you think it took for him to decide to resign? He was the first Pope to choose to do that in 600 years.
It took a lot of courage and humility. I think people recognize that then. They recognize it now as well. Think about it. He's the Pope, right? And he's got all this power, and there's prestige, and there's history of guys not retiring and just dying and with their boots on, and expectation of that. So to resign in that kind of retire in that setting that's a huge thing. I mean, I think you might want to look at it as interestingly what might be considered Pope Benedict's greatest moment of public weakness. Admitting in February of 2013 that he was no longer physically capable of governing the church, that's saying something. You could also say that was his greatest moment of strength, that he could,
I suppose you could.
You could look at it that way. I mean, he said someone else could meet the demands of this ministry, his ministry better than he. So what a powerful witness to his character and discipleship, to his deep humility and to his profound respect for the importance of the Petrine office.
But it wasn't just physical; it was mental too, wasn't it? I mean, he was going through a lot in terms of he was getting a lot of flack worldwide for some of his stances.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, mental, but I think he himself would say that he wasn't a great administrator.
Right.
He said that more than once. Even when they were electing him, he's like, I'm not a good administrator. And so I think he realized that he just wasn't able to, it just wasn't his gift. It wasn't his charisma.
But a pope doesn't need to be an administrator, does he? He doesn't need. He needs to be a leader. Right?
Leaders administrate things, administer things. I mean, you're running the Vatican.
You've got people helping you do that.
But you're overseeing it all.
Right. I thought you're the big vision person.
Well, I think it's then you have to put it into practice, right?
Right.
You get this vision, and then it wasn't his gift. I mean, he said that himself.
Yeah.
You guys sure you want me to do this thing? And I think he twice asked Pope John Paul if he could leave the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and just go back to writing and things.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he did it. God bless him. He's a son of the church, and it wasn't like he was a failure by any means.
No.
But it's just like this is somebody else can do this better. I mean, that's a huge thing to acknowledge.
That is a huge thing. That's humility.
Yeah.
That's
I would say.
Wow. He projected that. So, during the papacy of his predecessor, St. John Paul II, then Cardinal Ratzinger served as head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. You served as a priest and then as a judicial vicar during that time, I think. What were your impressions of his leadership in that Vatican office?
Well, I mean, he was hard-nosed. I mean, he was, for sure. I mean, I'd go back a little bit because people portray him, he's just conservative, and so some people weren't happy when he was chosen to be Pope because, he's just like some people aren't happy with Francis because they think he's a progressive, and that language it's not used well, I don't think, because he was a progressive with the Second Vatican Council. I mean, he was He was one of a prominent group of young progressive theologians who sought to bring Catholicism into the modern era, and there were people pushing back big time on that. Mm-hmm. So that's where he was at, and then after the council, then when he was concerned about progressives who were kind of hijacking it, they wanted to move beyond the council documents and compromise the integrity of Catholicism. So other people, they talk about the spirit of the council and everything, but then they could just run with that wherever they wanted to, right?
Okay.
So then he became more, he didn't. I was going to say he became more conservative, but he didn't. Interestingly, in his own judgment, his views never changed.
Okay.
It was these other things changing around him, so the liberal of the council became the conservative of the post-conciliar years, but like I said, even though in his own judgment, his views never changed. He was, in terms of...
So he thought maybe there was too much experimentation?
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah. There was. I mean, there were, for some people, they were taking it and running with it. And so then he's the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And he wanted to clarify the church's doctrine. And that was his job. That's what John Paul wanted him to do, and they were of one mind, I think, in terms of what their concerns were out there. So he investigated, restricted, and censored the scholarship and writings of a number of theologians.
Yes.
Right? And he robustly defended the Catholic teaching and tradition. So he was like liberation theology in Latin America, sexual morality, some of those kinds of things. He wanted to kind of clamp down on those things.
Do you think he clamped down too hard? Do you think that was fair in some cases to have censored some of the? One of the people he like Thomas Reese was the editor of America magazine, for example, and he was ousted.
Yeah, right.
As a result of.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of those people were rehabilitated later, right? I mean, you look back and. Liberation theology, okay. There were Marxist parts of that, but not. Okay. But not. There were other parts of it that were very in keeping with. And now it's just kind of been rehabilitated. Not the Marxist parts of it, but so there's. You look back and, you could question some of the calls that he made or how he went about things, but I don't know what. It's interesting. Like it's just so. To kind of pinpoint him as one certain kind of a person isn't fair. He was known as not only God's Rottweiler, but Dr. No at the Congregation.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? Dr. No? Yeah. So he was very conservative with regard to the internal life of the church, with its policies and doctrines and things. He was conservative on issues related to sexual ethics, gender, abortion. He called the church to a stronger sense of traditional Catholic identity in an increasingly secular age. So there was that.
Right.
But then when he became pope and he left that office where he had to crack down on things, in the congregation, and then he was referred to as Father Yes. He was Dr. No, and then Father Yes. He had this thing. I don't know if this is his term or somebody else's term, but he ran with it, affirmative orthodoxy. He wanted to, present the Catholic teaching in the most positive way possible. That's what he was trying to do as Pope, and he emphasized the Catholic yes rather than what was perceived to be the Catholicism as a list of no's, prohibitions. He saw that was what was going on out there, and he wanted to present Catholicism as a positive option. So and then in terms of, really conservative, well, with respect to public policy issues, he was very liberal. I mean, like, for example,
that's right.
He had no problem with universal health care. He critiqued free market economics. He described both communism and capitalism as failed ideologies. Now, some people that want to portray him as a conservative, they try to ignore that or explain that away somehow. He strongly opposed both Iraqi wars.
So very, very clearly.
He was very strong in defending the poor. He's the first pope to talk about the environment. John Paul didn't talk about that much.
They called him the Green
Pope, right? And he installed solar panels on roof at the Vatican. So I mean,
so we were all trying to peg him in a political sort of
people
way.
kind of right. We do that all the time.
And he wasn't. He was
more complicated than nuanced than people give him credit for, I think.
Well, so I'm wondering, you talked about how he tried to make the faith clear to people, particularly when he served as Pope. In what ways did he give attention to the synthesis of faith and reason, and why was that so important?
Yeah, so he definitely emphasized the essential relationship between the two. In fact, I was a little late to this podcast because I was talking to somebody and I was getting into faith and reason, and it made me think of Pope Benedict. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to go to this podcast. So let me just give you some quotes from him. Let them speak for himself. He says he said or wrote somewhere at some point, the God in whom we believe is a God of reason. A reason to be sure, which is not a kind of cold mathematics of the universe, but is one with love and with goodness. Again, there he goes back to love. So it's like, they can go together. It's not one has to be this, this cold sort of calculated kind of mathematical thing, but there's can be love and reason and goodness in that. He said. So there's secularism and fundamentalism. You can see those as two different things. Secularism maybe is more running with reason and discounting faith, and fundamentalism kind of really all over faith and discounting reason. So he says both of those two, secularism and fundamentalism, exclude the possibility of fruitful dialogue and effective cooperation between reason and religious faith. Reason always stands in need of being purified by faith. And for its part, religion always needs to be purified by reason in order to show its authentically human face. So he saw them as being both essential and playing off each other. So like if you're just so much into just reason and you lose sight of faith, then it's going to be.
Wasn't he the one who came up with the term intelligent, or intelligent design, or what was that term?
I don't know that was that. I don't remember that as coming from him. Maybe I know what you're talking about.
But I can't remember. Something to do with the idea that the Creator,
in terms of evolution and all that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what he said about that. But he definitely, he evolution, if that's how it worked, then that would be, he didn't, fight that. He said religion and faith can come to each other's assistance. Only together will they save man. Entranced by an exclusive reliance on technology, reason without faith is doomed to flounder in an illusion of its own omnipotence. Faith without reason risks being cut off from everyday life. So he's they need each other, is what he's saying. They one or the other, you're going to go off in a bad direction, and it's going to be it's going to be problematic.
So where did you see an interconnection between his theology and his spirituality?
So he would say, if the Eucharist is the source and summit, and everything about Christian life, and so liturgy and all that. So he would, I think, start with liturgy, and he said, right praise, worship, liturgy, leads to right doctrine. That right doctrine, the fancy word for that is orthodoxy. So he would start with, like I said, liturgy is always kind of at the center of things for him. Liturgy leads to right doctrine. The intellectual theologian kind of a thing. It's going back to the pastoral. What was that? Pastoral, intellectual, and that we started out with, and
pastorally, intellectually, and spiritually.
And spiritual, right? So starting out with the spiritual, right praise leads to right doctrine, the intellectual orthodoxy, which leads then to right action or practice, orthopraxy, so pastoral care. So that's right action or right practice is the word is orthopraxy. So which is pastoral care for the poor, the sick, the abandoned. So that's how those all fit together.
Which comes first, or do they all kind of?
I was saying praise.
Yeah.
Liturgy is the source and summit of our Christian life, right? I mean, the Eucharist
starts with prayer.
And that's why that was so centered for him.
Okay.
The liturgy, and then that leads to, if that's in good order and there's right praise, then it leads to a correct doctrine.
Okay.
And then if we have good doctrine, then that leads to good actions, the right action,
led by the Holy Spirit, I guess, because
they're all right, exactly, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, Catholics had high praise for his apostolic exhortation, Sacramentum Caritatis, the Sacrament of Charity. What was striking to you about that document, about that exhortation?
Well, I mean, the first sentence is always important in documents, papal documents, and the title comes from that. The Sacrament of Charity is the first words, and that's how then Sacramentum Caritatis. So the first sentence is the Sacrament of Charity, the Holy Eucharist, is the gift that Jesus Christ makes of Himself, thus revealing to us God's infinite love for every man and woman. Right. So again, it's the same kinds of things we've been saying. There's liturgy, there's a Eucharist, and then it leads that reveals God's love. He always was hitting on love, and so and he says he said in there the gospel story of the life, death, and new life of Jesus vividly displays the height, breadth, length, and depth of the love of Jesus. So, just taking a look at the story of Jesus, that helps us understand how much He loves us, right?
Right.
And He's, another thing I like from there, in terms of what was striking in that document, he said the liturgy of the Word prepares the table for the liturgy of the Eucharist. So we know it's that order: the Word first, and then we hear, and then we celebrate the Eucharist. But that's kind of nice in terms of preparing the table.
I like that.
For the liturgy of the Eucharist. He said,
and it prepares you for the work outside.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. And then he says, Scripture and sacrament, story and supper mutually illumine each other, which is nice.
That's nice. That's nice language.
And then since we're in the whole thing, Eucharistic revival, I quote this a lot from this document. He wrote that the Eucharist is a mystery to be believed, celebrated, and lived.
Yes.
And again, it's believe, then there's intellectual thing, celebrated, there's a liturgical thing, lived is a pastoral thing. Again, it's kind of pulling those things together.
Right. I included something from that document in an editorial.
Oh, good.
It was very inspiring. But
yeah.
So what were the most significant challenges that he dealt with during his papacy, would you say?
I would say that there's anybody that's in that office for any period of time, there's going to be a number of things that are going to be challenges. But the two most important ones, I think, were sexual abuse and finances. And when he was elected, it's like, deal with these things. And they said the same thing with Pope Francis to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And so I think Benedict kind of grabbed onto those and got as far as he was going to be able to get with them,
right.
And then he handed it off. But starting with finances, there's corruption in the Vatican, that area of finance, and so he worked at that. He took some steps with it, but he had difficulty with it, and anybody would have. So he got, like I said, as far as he could with it. But then, with regard to clergy sexual abuse, he was, and some people would say he didn't do enough, and okay, but he was the first person in the Vatican as a prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith to take clergy sex abuse that crisis seriously and to begin to do something about it. I mean, I think everybody would agree with that. He laicized hundreds of priests, maybe almost 1,000. And then as Pope, he moved much more decisively, I would suggest, than Pope John Paul II to respond to this crisis. I mean, we kind of get a sense more and more of how serious it was and is. And he welcomed the American bishops' zero tolerance policy enacted in 2002. Some people were not; they thought that was going too far. He welcomed, and then it ultimately became sort of the standard for the whole church. But there was a widespread perception that the Vatican's approach to the sexual abuse crisis seemed more concerned with the church's reputation than with the well-being of survivors. Yeah. So some people would criticize kind of some of the, his decisions that he made in that area. So those are the two main things. But there's also, there's an occasional public gaffe,
right.
And there are for Pope Francis too. Like the one that you hear about, people remember the most is it was well intentioned, but there was this well intentioned but ill received address in Regensburg, which angered a lot of Muslims and kind of hampered the church's interfaith efforts. When he quoted a Byzantine emperor who linked Muhammad with violence, and it didn't come across the way he wanted it to come across, but so it goes. Yeah. So
my last question then, and I don't know, this maybe is a repeat, but what the heck? What is your lasting impression of Pope Emeritus?
So I was just, I was thinking about that. I'm just going to quote some of his own words again. Because a couple of these lines maybe I've quoted already, but this says a lot to me about him, these things. Like I said already, when he was elected Pope, Pope Benedict described himself as a simple, humble laborer in the vineyard of the Lord. I like that, He also said to those gathered in St. Peter's Square, "Do not be afraid of Christ. He takes nothing away, and he gives you everything." I've always liked that. Don't be afraid of him. Like, oh my God, Jesus! But no, he doesn't. He takes nothing away, and he gives. And what do I have to give up? Nothing, and he'll give you everything. The homily at the Mass for his inauguration, he said, "The church is alive, and she is alive because Christ is alive, because he is truly risen." Something nice about that, just that the way he put it. I said this already. Love seeks understanding. It wishes to know even better the one whom it loves. It seeks his face. Another line, I was reading some of these things when I was reading things about people were saying about it. I'd forgotten some of these things, but they came back to mind. So he said once, "Life is not a circle that closes, but a line that tends toward its fullness." That's kind of nice,
That's interesting.
And then his final words on his deathbed, where "Jesus, I love you." Jesus, ich liebe dich in German. Jesus, I love you. That's how he closed it out. Speaking of love, of course,
awesome.
Which is very beautiful.
That seems like a great way to end our podcast
Yeah,
today.
I think so.
Thanks, Bishop. See you next time.
Sure, you bet.